Now we need to write our user repository to fetch information about our users and also update them. Let's make a new folder inside repositories called user. And here we're going to make the first file base user repository. And then the second file is user repository. Let's export both these inside the barrel file. And now inside base user repository, we're going to have our abstract class, base user repository. And just like our base auth repository, we're going to define the method signatures that we need to implement inside our user repository. The first method we need is going to return a future user, get user with ID, and we pass in a string user ID. And we need to import models.dart. The second method we need is going to return future void, and this is going to update the user. And for this we pass in the user with the updated information. Let's go into user repository, class user repository, extends base user repository. And the first thing we have to do is create a dependency on Firebase Firestore, because we're going to be accessing the database from this file. So let's make the variable Firebase Firestore, Firebase Firestore, the constructor, user repository, and this takes in Firebase Firestore. And then we assign the variable equal to the passed in Firebase Firestore. If there's no Firebase instance passed in, then we can use the nullWhere operator and then create the instance Firebase Firestore.instance. Now let's go up to the user repository line, and then we can create the two missing overrides. For get user with ID, the first thing we have to do is create a final doc and set that equal to Firebase Firestore .collection paths.users .doc, and then we grab the document with the user ID .get. And if we hover over .get, we can see that it's giving back a future document snapshot. So in order to get the document snapshot, we need to make this function async and then await Firebase Firestore.collection.doc.get. And so what this line does is it goes into our database, accesses the users collection, gets the document with the specified user ID, and then we call .get to read the document from Firestore. This gives us back a document snapshot, and we want to convert this document snapshot into our user model. In our user model, we wrote the method called fromDocument, and we can pass in our document snapshot, which would then get converted into a user. So here, the first thing we need to do is return, check if the document exists, which means that there is a document that exists with this user ID inside of this collection. Then we just have to call user.fromDocument and pass in our doc. Otherwise, we're going to return user.empty, which is just an empty user, where all the information about the user is just default values. And that's all we have to do to read a document from Firebase and convert it to our own user model. Now let's write update user. Now this is going to be a similar idea where we need to access the correct path. And so we can copy this line here from await all the way to the doc user ID. Let's paste this in, make the function asynchronous. Instead of passing in .doc user ID, since we pass in the user, we can do user.id. And then we want to call update. And update takes in a map string dynamic. And inside of our user model, we have toDocument, which turns our user model into a map string dynamic, which is what we want to pass into this method. So here we can just call user.toDocument. and save that. And that's our update user function. The last thing we should do is make the parameters of these methods @required. So they're required. And import meta.